No, Amy, who will be, I think, taking over from Alan, and this will be your last cabinet.
It will be indeed, Chair.
So I'll not steal the thunder from Monday. So, well, thank you anyway for all your efforts to get from the cabinet and what you've been doing, thingy. And welcome, Amy. And I believe you're coming on Monday as well.
Yes.
To observe. That'll be fun for you. So, thank you. Is there any apologies for absence? No?
None received, Chair.
Thank you. Declarations of interest. Members are requested to declare the existence and nature of any disclosable pecuniary interest and or other interest not already on their register of interest in any item on the agenda and withdraw from the meeting at the appropriate time. I've none. Has anybody else any?
Chair.
Thank you. The minutes of the last meeting, which is on pages 49 in the facts. Any comments on them? Are we happy with them as a true record? Yeah, thank you. We'll move on to item 4, funding to voluntary and community sector infrastructure support organisations 23-24. Jane, it's in your name. You lead on that? Or?
Yeah, I'll let Tris move forward since she's written the report.
Okie dokie. So yeah, this is the annual summary of the grants we award to the voluntary community sector infrastructure groups. I won't kind of dwell on the detail, but as per usual, we aim to support in the region of 20,000 households a year. The information in this report covers the 23-24 financial year. You'd probably be aware that we do have a little bit of a time lag on the figures. So last year we supported just under 22,500 households. Looking at the previous trend, we did have a dip during COVID, but that was a lot of people they weren't accessing access to support and information, or trying to pursue sort of social activities. But that's obviously, we're kind of pricking up to pre-pandemic levels now. So back to business as usual. And obviously as well, a lot of households are seeking support and advice on cost of living challenges as well. So in terms of the breakdown and the sort of beneficiaries and the types of support that people have sought advice on, Citizens Advice, who was our largest beneficiary, did see just under 18,000 people last year, with the top reason for people accessing advice is for benefits and income maximisation. What's been quite good also that the method of reaching out to residents includes GP surgeries, food banks and what have you, and also home visits to inbound housebound clients as well. And part of our funding for information does contribute to a part-time volunteer coordinator, which obviously helps with the capacity for them to offer that advice. So then we have Derbyshire Law Centre that continue to provide the free and impartial advice, particularly focused on housing and civil rights. They're a key agency to avoiding homelessness in the district, so our homelessness team do work quite closely with them as well. Unsurprisingly, obviously housing was the top issue for people accessing their services last year, with just under 800 beneficiaries. You'll be aware that we've reinstated the grant to Derbyshire Unemployed Workers Centre. So last year was the sort of first year for a while that they received a full grant. They were able to assist over 700 beneficiaries, with the personal independence allowance being the top issue for people contacting them. Volunteer Centre, supporting just under 400 people, but they've got two key schemes that they're delivering now. Obviously, matching volunteers is kind of a key purpose for the organisation, but they're also leading on a befriending service, which obviously helps socially isolated people, and they're also running the home from hospital service. So this helps people maybe get some shopping in, medication and what have you. So it's quite an important service that they're now looking after. But the largest reason for people contacting them was to access volunteering. Rural Action Derbyshire continue to support our rural communities, sort of including farmers. They saw over 1,000 beneficiaries in North East Derbyshire last year, with cost of living being a key reason for people accessing their services. And then our community action grants, I know slightly different, but these are the small £500 grants that we award to groups. And this is about community action, community capacity, cohesion and what have you. So last year we funded 15 groups totaling just over £7,000. With this one, we have up to a year's time lag on beneficiary numbers, because we can award a grant maybe February, March. It might be 12 months before we have that kind of impact assessment in terms of what the grant's achieved. So just to put it into context for you, we believe we helped 1,700 people last year, but for the previous 22-23 year, we supported 4,700 people through that, through the community action grants. Just to inform Cabinet, I attended community scrutiny yesterday because they were quite keen to see the benefits, obviously, of the funding that we do give to the sector. What they have asked is at the May 25 community scrutiny meeting, they would like a presentation from Citizen Advice, Derbyshire Law Centre and Volunteer Centre to just come and present the impact that the organisations, obviously those organisations have been here before and presented to Cabinet, but they've never gone to scrutiny. So that's something that they've asked me to set up ready for May next year. So I'm happy to take any questions.
Thanks for that. I just be welcome to the presentation. I think I've sat through half a dozen of them. On loads of it every year. We were having somebody come in. They was saying things, but they all do a great job. But we'll take it as read, and I know your team sort of oversee what they're doing, so that money's well spent. I'd also like to make the comment on the Unemployed Workers Centre and the work that they've been doing. I know Councillor Morley, he told me that he was pushing for it in Clay Cross. They were advising people to go to see the Unemployed Workers Centre people. Anyway, I think last time I spoke to him, he was saying how much money that had generated for people in and around Clay Cross. It were a lot. It were thousands of pounds.
Yeah.
That they wouldn't have claimed if they hadn't gone to that drop-in centre. So, like I say, they all do a great job, and I know they're all going to struggle because I think the county council is pulling their funding for a lot of these groups, isn't it? So
We've not got the results of the consultation yet, so obviously we'll wait to see.
I think I could tell you what that is. I do. So, I meant to say, are we recording now?
Yes, it's been recorded, Chair.
I didn't know. I meant to ask that at least. Jane, do you want to? Sorry.
No, I just want to really say, thanks to Trish and her team for doing the work that they do, because they do work very closely with these groups. And I think, the Derbyshire Unemployed Workers Centre itself, I think, has really benefited from getting that full grant back. And therefore, that's having a knock-on effect to people of North East Derbyshire, which is obviously a positive thing. So, yeah, I'd just like to recommend they take the recommendations that should be put forward, please.
Yeah, I'll second that. Are we all any more questions on that? All right, all in favour? We note the report. Thank you. We'll move on to the council plan. Performance report. Update April to June. That's in my name. Seriously.
Thank you. Thank you.
And again, it's a really positive report. I think one thing of that, yeah, I mean, I've got the glossy brochure on a screen. Can we print any of these off as an update? I know we've got the council plan as it stands.
Circulate. Oh, cancel on screen. Yeah.
Oh, hey, Kathy, all right. Didn't know you were there. But yeah, I'm really pleased with it, and I know you've highlighted some of the things. Do you want to speak to it first, so I don't steal your thunder?
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. So what tried to add a bit more detail this time. So we've pulled metrics through. So there's actually more information presented to cabinet this time, and also to scrutiny beforehand. So under the public services one and the Live Well one, we've got a suite of metrics that we've put in the report, and you can see that some of those are fine and some of those we flagged as red this time. Not overly concerned because it's Q1 and it's the first reporting period, isn't it? But we'll obviously look more closely at those at Q2. But overall, it's a very good report with lots of evidence across all the tactics and what the council plan is trying to achieve. So I think you wanted copies. So if you want us to provide more copies of this, actual hard copies, then obviously we can do that and make that available to members as required.
It was just a thought, because it's not always easy to fully grasp on screen what's in there, because I went through it the other day and I thought, oh crikey, that it's really positive. And I know there's some stuff that's missing, that we're behind on, but there's reasons for that. The thing you highlighted, that the gym membership is up and we've get out more community grants.
Yeah.
We're working with Chesterfield Football Club, and I've seen that, the trust. And a different thing, this social prescribing project, which is £100,000 that we're doing. And I know we've met with Integrated Care Board on page 22, we're on about that. And also we met yesterday, went into Chesterfield College yesterday, looking at 2.3 in the report about the skills and the green skills, how we can with college to develop them leading. We saw them. It gives a lot of focus, I think, that council plan. So we can see where we're going. We've got something to measure. So I think it's really positive. So I'll move the recommendations that the progress against the council plan be noted. Are there any more comments or questions on that? Are we all happy with that?
Yeah.
And just going back to, I mean, I know it's printed off in packs, but it's whether or not we do a bit more with that.
Would you like us to make some copies which would then be available and say,
Yeah, I've just been, not a million on it, but enough so we can leave them, so other members can pick one up. And maybe even in staff rooms, stuff like that. So it's not just something that's on a shelf, it's a living document, isn't it? Every quarter or every half year, just where we are with things. I don't know.
If it's worthwhile it being printed out and given to parish councils so they can
Yeah.
There's the point that we really don't want to start going back to printing these documents. We do put it on the website, we do put things. I accept that we need to have some printed, but I'm really rubbish not.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, because like you say,
We've made real strides to go
Yeah.
digital and it would feel.
okay,
I think it would.
But more than happy to.
Yeah, I think the parish council.
okay, I'll live with that, Jane.
It's in the digital image, absolutely.
Yeah, just because there's people coming in, they can
Yeah.
just sit and read it now.
Yeah, that's a fair. Are we all in favour of noting that then? Thank you. We're all sorry, Pat, I don't want to get anyway. We'll move on to the item 6, Treasury Management Update, April to June 24, 41. Pat.
Thank you, Chair. SIPFA's revised Treasury Management Code made quarter reporting of indicators mandatory last year. And whilst these updates have been provided for many years, more detail is now required. Therefore, a separate report for Treasury Management is now produced alongside the budget monitoring each quarter. As a part of introduction, all these tables are the prescribed limits of figures where you should be between, under or over. It tells you where you borrowed, where you've lent money to, where you've borrowed money from, etc. And you will note in this report that there are no compliance matters or risk raised in this quarter's report. I'm happy to take any questions, but the recommendation is that we note the report. We're within the parameters all the way through the report.
Yeah. I have, any, do you want to help, Jane?
No, Pat said all of that, Chris said all of that, that's fine, thank you.
Thank you. I always find it good reading the Treasury Management Report. Always look forward to it, Jane.
It's certainly better than night all.
Right, are we all, to note that then? Are we happy?
Yeah.
Thank you. And we'll move on to the medium-term financial plan, monitoring April to June. That's again Q1.
Yes, the purpose of this report is to update the cabinet on the financial position of the council at Q1. Q1.
And at 1:30, it's not so good.
Appendices 1 and 2 summarises the general fund position. The general fund is 302,000 underspent in Q1. Underspends against the pay budget account for 189,000, and income received from the planning fees was 57,000 higher than budgeted for. The main variances in each directorate are detailed in this report at point 2.5 and 2.7. There are very few variances to note on the HRA, so I will just point you to Appendix 3, which provides Q1 position. Appendix 4 details the capital expenditure incurred on a scheme-by-scheme basis. Details of variance can be found at 2.16. The main variance in this quarter is the relation to the town centre generation project at Clay Cross. But this is fully expected to be on track by the end of the year. Again, there is no real variations. Place directorate was 96,000 lower than the original forecast. Fuel bills were 38,000 lower, and planning fees were 57,000 up. There's a 33 overspend for transport materials and other income streams, such as licensing and MOT testing is lower than budgeted. The Finance and Resources Directorate was 0.092, lower than the original forecast. The main variance is in relation to salary underspends. And the gross assets was up 0.113 lower than the original forecast. Again, overspends relating to NMDR Pioneer House, and again, utility costs are down slightly. But those are the sorts of things that we go through. The recommendation is that we note the report, and that the Service Scrutiny Committee note the report and make any comments that they believe to be appropriate with regard to the attached report, Chair.
Thank you, Pat.
It should be the cabinet and make the report.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah, the cabinet on the recommendation. That's what I thought, really. But it has it been to services already?
It has to do, it says the scrutiny.
Yeah.
It's already been there. It's just, but we know the report then.
And just from my, I think it is a positive report. Again, we've catched up the underspend. So we're doing all right.
Yeah, absolutely, Chair. So you'll recall from when we did the budget, we had £300,000 before council tax. We approved the council tax at the council meeting, which brought it down to 100, and we've now clawed that back. So we won't need to take anything out of the resilience reserve this year, which is indeed positive.
Just one question, because I've just come from that meeting, the employment board at East Midlands about the pay claim and where we're at with that and what impact will that have.
Yeah, so we built 2% into our budget, so we've got 2% resilience in there. If it's higher than 2%, then that will be a cost to the budget. It'd be nice if we'd have some indication at this time of year, because we're just starting to do budgets, but we'll just forward forecast based on our best knowledge. And then go again. But as you know, every year that can be a pressure to us.
What I can say from that meeting, the East Midlands Employment Board and the unions were going to write to government and ask for whatever pay increases funded centrally, and I just said best to look on that. So, because that the argument is, health service and other, they get external funding, we don't.
Exactly. They didn't cut it for those.
So the more the pay rises,
the more we've got to try.
the more we've got from.
Quarter one's the easy one, really. It begins to reflect if there are any real anomalies coming, but it's quarter two and quarter three that are the important ones. We're tickling along quite nicely at the moment.
Thank you. Are we all happy to note that report then? That's the cabinet, not the services.
Sorry.
Thank you. Right then, this is a good one. The planning policy annual monitoring report for publication, or its next one, that's the best one. So we're on with that. Steve.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it's the annual performance report for 1st of April 2023 to the 31st of March this year. And if you look through it generally, against our plan and policies, we're performing well. However, we should, and it might be discussed later on in the meeting, that if there are significant changes in policy, it could leave us in a difficult position. So that might come later. As I said, the policies in the local plan are performing well. There are key areas to note that need to be monitored carefully. Employment land take-up, we need to look, I think, over the coming months and how we've developed the policy, a review of the types of employment. I think since it was last done, there potentially is a shift in different employment requirements. So we need to look at that and consider that as part of the local plan. The housing land supply, we are in a position where we've got we are compliant with that, but as I said, changes might impact on that. We're performing well on affordable housing. The housing type of mix we need to review, but generally, as things stand at the moment in the current position, we're doing quite well. Any comments you want to make on that, David, before I move the recommendation?
I think you've summarised it well, Councillor Pickering. I think you're right to look at things like the employment and clearly housing land supply, and in relation to the employment side of things, Cabinet will remember it was the back end of last year that you approved the action plan for reviewing our current evidence base. I'll tell you that's work that's been underway since that time, and we are doing joint work with Chesterfield and Bolsover in relation to employment land study. It's very early days, but that is commencing, and as Councillor Pickering says, that will need to inform future iterations of the local plan. But yeah, nothing else to add.
Are there any questions?
Thank you, Steve. Well, not a comment, just a comment, really. Again, it is a good report, and I read through this again on screen, and I ended up printing it off because information in this appendix, I think it's useful to keep referring back to. How many houses we've built, where we've built them, what's happening around the district. There's an awful lot of information in there, what's happening basically around the district. It does link in to the next report because we've got to carry on building. That's good. So thank you, Steve, for that. And
We should note in there, Chair, that no employment line you've lost or gained over that period, which is quite useful. And the other key thing, I think, before I move it, is that net completions in new dwellings for that period was 543. we might look at new targets that's been speculated on. That doesn't necessarily indicate that we could meet those. You know, that were a short spike given the inception of the previous plan, really. So over time, it's not necessarily indicating that any higher figures will be sustainable for us. And as I said, we can demonstrate a 5.5 year supply of land for housing. So just with those comments, Chair, then I'll move the recommendation that we note the contents of that report and approve publication on the council's website so that we fulfil our statutory.
Thank you. Any more questions or comments? All in favour of that? You. Now then, item 9, response to the consultation on the proposed reforms to the National Planning Policy Framework and other changes to the planning system. Right. Yeah, it's over to you, Steve.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, I think before we get on to recommendations, we should bear in mind that this paper was written before the special council meeting last week. And given that discussion there and other thoughts that's been taken into consideration, we might want to have a look through this. I mean, I think a key message for us is that at the moment, there's no transition arrangements in place. That would be extremely useful. So before we move it, Chair, in light of that, I probably just want to see if there's roundtable discussion about some of the content of it.
Does David want to go in first, or you want? I've got one or two things just to clarify. Do you want to say out, David, and then come back at the end? Or
Happy for you to go, Chair. No.
okay, that's fine. I'd like you say on back of that meeting last Thursday, the extraordinary council meeting. Yeah, wasn't it? It weren't special at all. I think we need to be clear on one or two things, and like I said at the meeting, there's 106 questions in the back of this. Some technical questions that need answering, and we've got officers that have spent a lot of time and effort looking into all this. I know David and your team have done a lot, but I just want to be clear on certain things. So I'll give you a list, and if you want to make a note and come back to me, because rather than do it one at a time, I just got a general feeling, and I think you've alluded to this first one. Are there any allowances being made for districts like ours that have been delivering more than their fair share of housing, or we've gone above as housing targets? And I think that links into the transition. And secondly, can we reassure people in North East Derbyshire that there is no intention to concrete over the Greenbelt, which has been said in certain places? I'd just like to get some clarity on that. Is there any truth in the fact that we will have to meet any unmet need from our neighbours like Sheffield or IP? Just some clarity around that, because that's been muted and was alluded to at the council meeting. And finally, there are also concerns raised about the reduction in the ability for local people to be involved or have a say in developments in their area. Just some clarity around that from your perspective, either you, Steve, or David, how have you interpreted this question, this consultation? Because I'm getting conflicting messages on those things.
Okay. If I took them in that order and say,
Yeah,
whatever it's from my perspective, and then David might want to come in and give any more technical or substantial detail to it. As I said at the start, at the moment, as it's proposed, there are no transition arrangements that would apply to us, which does give us cause for concern. There is speculative increase in numbers. Yeah. It puts the local plan that we've got at risk, and something I'll come on to in a bit could leave us open to speculative development, which is a real concern. The concreting over the Greenbelt, don't think as an authority we've got any intention of concreting over the green belt. I think, you know, it's a bit of mischief making from some other political parties that are trying to frighten people. You know, as I pointed out in the council meeting, it's an ambitious target, 1.5 million homes over this parliament. 1.6 million have been promised by another political party. And we know from a study in 2022 by an independent planning consultancy that if we took all the brownfield sites that's available and developed them to their capacity, there's only enough room for 1.4 million properties. So there's going to have to be, if that's up and down the country, yes, let's not forget that it's not all built in North East Derbyshire. You know, and what we want to reflect in this response is that, yes, we want our fair share, but we want it done proportionately. And as I said before, transition arrangements within that will be really useful. So hopefully we're going to be labouring that. So there's no intention from this authority, as far as I'm concerned, that we want to concrete over the green belt and spoil the beauty of North East Derbyshire.
Oh, thank you.
The interesting bit about neighbouring authorities, were laboured at that meeting or given to point out that we got to take some of Sheffield's building on. That's not the case at all. You know, they might want to do some of ours. It is something that's negotiated, that Chair, and you know, I've just recently signed a statement of common ground with Sheffield that's been negotiated by David and his team, and we specifically put in that and stated to Sheffield at that time that we did not have the capacity to take on some of Sheffield's building responsibilities, and that went in that statement of common ground. It's not something that's forced on us. It's a discussion. It's a two-way process, and we're not minded to be doing that at this moment in time. So we're not forced to take anything from any other authority. And local people consultation. The consultation is not proposing at the moment any change to regulations about how a planning application is determined, including the duties in place on councils to consult local residents. So that's not included in anything at the moment. So how we consult will still continue. And that's my understanding of it, Chair. I'll ask David if he wants to give you any more information about that.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor. I'm just picking up some of the key points. So in terms of transition, yeah, it's the transition arrangements that are talked about in the consultation are for those authorities that have a plan at an advanced stage of preparation, but not actually in place yet. So obviously our current local plan is not yet 3 years old. It's nearly, but not yet 3 years old. So in the current cycle, we do have an up-to-date local plan, and our position in relation to housing supply is protected because 5 years is the key milestone. So that is our current position. And the tone that we wanted to strike as officers and in the recommendation is really that to go from a position of strength effectively to pretty much overnight one of weakness is obviously a very difficult position to reconcile alongside the overall objective of it being a plan-led system. Because what will happen if you immediately go from current local plan target is 330 homes a year. And yes, we're delivering above that as per the last item. But as Councillor Pickering referred to earlier, there has been a spike over the last 3 years in relation to our delivery, which you would expect on the adoption of a local plan, because a lot of sites are in the wings, and then once it's adopted, they come forward. So given the degree of uplift, it will have a significant impact if that is an overnight change, because we would go from a position of, say, relative strength now to one of weakness in respect of we would be open to speculative development because we wouldn't be able to demonstrate 5-year housing land supply. We know from the monitoring report that is an issue with the current local plan already, and that will be compounded. So, as I say, hopefully from an officer perspective, we're being very strong throughout in answering the relevant questions that, you know, whilst in principle, things like having an annual reporting of your 5-year supply is a good thing from a professional perspective, because we'll be able to keep a more accurate tab on it rather than wait 5 years and then suddenly realise we've got a problem, which is a potential under the current system as it stands today. But the bottom line is we need a transition to be able to bring people with us, because what we're going to be saying is it's a plan-led system, yet all around people are going to be seeing speculative development applications. So it's trying to avoid that. So that's something that runs through our draft responses. In relation to the green belt, you know, the fundamental elements of this consultation really are the housing numbers change, because there's that change to how the numbers are calculated, and then the other aspect is introducing grey belt. So to be clear on what grey belt means, there will be allowances for previously developed land in the green belt, which can potentially be developed now, but there will be a less restrictive definition applied to what was possible on brownfield land in the previously developed land in the green belt. And then lower quality land within the green belt could be potentially argued through the planning application system or through the local plan process as grey belt. The consultation asks a number of questions about the specifics of getting into the definition from what grey belt is, because it's not particularly easy. Essentially what you're trying to do is take out parcels of something in green belt, which has been defined for 50 plus years and is very restrictive by its nature, and then trying to take out parcels that might be developable. So a number of things that we're highlighting in the draft response is basically how you tighten that definition as much as possible. So for example, in relation to brownfield, it's talking about doesn't have a substantial impact on open. Substantial is not a particularly helpful word, you know, in a contentious and highly contested process like planning. Likewise, limited impact is one of the key elements of undeveloped land in the green belt, could potentially be grey belt if it has a limited contribution to green belt purposes. What does limited mean? There's going to be something that's argued about on a case by case basis. And one of the key things that we've tried to emphasise is that this shouldn't really be left to the development management process. One of the 106 questions is effectively, should this be allowed to be judged through an application? We're saying, no, it shouldn't. That's our suggestion. No, it shouldn't. It should be a plan-led process, so that there is some consistency around, you know, what are we saying is potentially grey belt if there is any in North East Derbyshire. And I think that is linked to one of the kind of concerns that we've certainly got as officers about this. On one level, it's talking about a plan-led system, but things are going to be happening round about us at the same time as we're trying to get a new planning system. It's the concern about those two things running alongside each other. So basically, we're saying that the definition needs to be tightened up. It needs to avoid those kind of, as many as 10 grey terms, but you know, things that are hard to, they'll just be argued about throughout the whole process, which clearly will simply delay matters and cause more uncertainty for people. Just going on to the unmet need point. I think, to be fair, Councillor Pickering said most of it on this really, but I think it is worth reflecting that the changes would also mean that any authority with Greenbelt has to now go through a process of reviewing its Greenbelt to make clear that it can't meet its own need. So whilst one way of saying that might be there is a potential risk of the need to accommodate Sheffield need in North East Derbyshire, which hasn't actually risen as a result of this consultation. That's one side. But the other side of it is actually Sheffield will be under a greater obligation to look at its own green belt. So I think that's worth considering. And then in relation to the public participation, I mean, again, I think Councillor Pickering said most of it. The only other thing to highlight would be that as part of the consultation, in terms of the introductory text, so not one of the questions or one of the proposed changes, but there's reference to the importance of having local plans in place, and this goes back to my point about it being a plan-led system, because it makes reference to the existing powers that the Secretary of State has to intervene where a council is not being proactive about getting a plan in place, and potential changes to that. And in that section, it refers to local plans should be in place so that there's a clear plan as to how development should happen, not if development should happen. But that isn't a change from the current position. Any local plan to get adopted has to demonstrate how it's going to deliver its needs. So our current plan, if we'd said we need to deliver 330 homes a year but proposed no sites to do so, we wouldn't have got it adopted. So just to be clear on that, the whole question about if doesn't mean that people can't comment if an application comes in and on the merits of that application. And it was referred to at council, actually, the recent application at Dronfield, Chesterfield Road, Dronfield, that was refused on officer recommendation. That was a site allocated in the green belt, allocated in the local plan. So that, you know, that question of how we would meet our need in strategic terms was answered by its allocation. The fact that it didn't meet the policies and design meant that we refused it. So those two things shouldn't be conflated. And there isn't a fundamental change, as I said, in respect to that. That's not referred to in the Constitution. So that's all to say. That's fine.
Thank you. Is there anything, I mean, I'll flag them questions, or anything you'd like to highlight or bring to attention over and above those things?
There's a lot of detail.
There is.
There is a lot of detail. I mean, briefly, the reason for, it's clear one of the headlines is the change in housing. As you say, we're not immune from that, but the consultation is looking at a fundamental change to how numbers across the board are calculated. So, as has already been referred to, there's a commitment from the government to 1.5 million homes to the Parliament and reinstating the 300,000 homes a year, which has been quite a long-standing figure quoted as basically how you would meet your need, how we would meet our need as a country. So, looking at that figure, the current system, as it stands today, is based on a calculation, is population projections, and there's an element that relates to an affordability equation, so looking at house prices and income at a local level, and then there's a cap applied. So that's the current method of calculating housing needs. And for North East Derbyshire, that comes at around 240. That's the number. The reason we're potentially going up to 611 is because instead of using population projections, the standard method is proposed to be changed to include a 0.8% annual increase in your existing housing stock. So rather than population, it's looking at housing stock increase. The reason that the 0.8 figure is being proposed is because if you look over, I think it's a 10-year period nationally, that is on average how much we've grown. So, and there was quite a lot of House of Commons research in the lead up to this consultation around, you know, the current standard method and the use of population projections is difficult because reliability of that over the long term is a weakness. Obviously, the stock-based projection, we're saying this in the consultation, it has a certainty in respect of you using something definitive, literally bricks and mortar, but that's its main advantage in terms of certainty. What it's then producing is this huge change that we then have to react to. So again, that's something that we are making clear in the consultation, that we, in the response, that, you know, if that is the change, then there's still a weakness to that, and we'd need to manage that transition across. I think, yeah, as I say, it's a long consultation, but the other points to highlight is that there are changes to the design policy. So this again was something that was referred to at full council in relation to reference to beautiful in design terms being in the current consultation. So that is something that from an officer perspective we support, because it, you know, should be about providing clarity about an objective assessment. Clearly beauty has the problem of not being particularly objective, whereas there are, for example, Building for Healthy Lives, there are nationally recognised mechanisms for assessing design quality. It will quite often be said that design is overall subjective. There are actually objective ways of assessing it, whereas beautiful kind of weakens that. In relation to affordable housing, there are specific requirements around affordable housing in some terms, affordable housing for sale. And the consultation is about taking away the nationally set percentages currently applied that we have to apply to each planning. So, for example, the starter homes, there's a specific requirement to make a certain proportion of starter homes part of any affordable housing. Proposals to basically do away with that and to encourage social rent. One of the questions does talk about potential risks around social rent, and our response is that we need to be careful around viability and the arguments that the developer puts forward. You know, the reason that they like affordable sale is because it's not guaranteed in terms of their bottom line. We will be having those kind of conversations, which doesn't mean we can't have them, but we need to raise viability is something that underpins Greybelt also, and the more papers there is in that, the more resource we have to put into trying to work that out slog it out on an application by application basis. So that's something else to highlight. The last thing I'll talk about is something quite different than the MPPF, but it's also covered by the consultation, is planning fees. And there's a number of questions around basically planning authorities recovering their costs. Something that we've introduced initiatives recently around charging for pre-app, which a lot of authorities do, and planning performance, which we're all on a similar vein, really. It's all about capturing the true top of officer time spent on actually facilitating the development industry. And in probably the headline is around whether fees could be set at a local level. At the moment, they're set nationally. I think our response is that probably a bit easier if they're set nationally, because that's a decision then taken out of our hands to a degree. There are dangers around regional competition if it's taken literally to the point of everybody can set their own thing. There will be halfway houses in reality. You could have an MCA region fee or that kind of process, but to be honest, the recommendation is, let's say, from set it nationally. But they are talking about significant increase in household. And we had this discussion around what we charge at the pre-app stage and trying to keep those costs lower. But the reality is household applications are the vast majority that we receive as a council and across the board as a country. Most applications to the extent obviously are house extensions. So the proposal would actually nearly double, in fact, slightly over double the current fee. So it will be up to 528, I think, is the proposal. So that's just something else that on its own would be quite a major change, but with everything else, it's kind of at the back end of 106 questions. So I'm going to else at the minute, Chair, but happy to.
That's fine, David. Thank you very much. Any comments or questions for David?
Yeah, I was going to make a comment. I was talking to one of the Labour councillors from Sheffield yesterday about the suggestion that Sheffield might want to take Howard, and the answer was no. We've already got highlighted the areas that we want to go on. So, I think that put my mind at rest a bit more about the comments that were made at Apple Council.
Yeah, I mean, I think as I said before, what it's talking about in relation to Greenbelt, I think, it applies to all authorities. So, whilst undoubtedly for us specifically, we're going to have to concentrate on the impact of a massive increase in our own housing, and that'll be obviously what we're concentrating on. If there is any element of conversations around unmet needs, the parameters haven't necessarily got easier. And in respect of authorities that have got Greenbelt like Sheffield, they've potentially got harder in the sense that they have more work to do, demonstrate that they can't meet their need, because one of the potential changes around Greenbelt is that where at the moment a Greenbelt review is effectively a voluntary decision if you want to as a council, not surprisingly, people probably don't want to go there, but that would become mandatory again, effectively, but it will be emphasised as a mandatory requirement. Where not going to the Greenbelt means that you can't meet your needs. So Sheffield would have to go through that exercise, whereas as of today, they could potentially argue you can't.
I'll just bring you back in a minute, Steve. Just a couple of comments then, just to be absolutely clear what we're saying and I haven't sort of read all these questions and the comments to them. But like I say, they are quite technical, some of these and stuff, but what we're saying within all this is that we want to really push for a transition period, to go from the 300 to the 600 expected housing, and I think we're accepting we've got to play our part in this housing delivery. We can't say we don't want it; it's going to happen, but we need to do it on our terms. I think that was said at the meeting as well, and also we want some better clarity around the definition of grey belt, because it's a bit vague at the moment. It's a bit grey. There's grey area, right?
I mean, yeah,
It's because without that, we're going to be in every application, the developer's going to say this is grey belt, we ain't going to say no, it's not. And you know, we'll be backwards and forwards on that for a long while. So that's obviously there's other issues within it, like you highlighted. But for us, I think as a district council and us as leadership, it's to really work that through, because it will cause us some difficulty. We're not hiding away from that. There's going to be issues within it, but we want to safeguard our district as best we can. But while accepting, we will be having some houses built.
yeah, that's right, Chair. Just whilst I remember, as part of our suggested response, I suppose as a pragmatic suggestion really is, obviously yes, we are sort of asking for transition arrangements, but as part of that, we are suggesting there are measurable ways that the government could, effectively reward councils that are actually active. So in respect to that, the transition arrangements might only apply if a council has the published timetable for producing its next local plan. So it's recognised that in that scenario, a council would have to be recognising that its current plan isn't fit for the new purposes and is therefore doing something about it. So that's something that we felt was a pragmatic suggestion, because it's unlikely that transition arrangements are going to be granted for every authority that currently has a plan and is subject to significant change, because that affects a lot of districts.
Yeah.
So in trying to qualify that, and of course, with regard to the government have said that we want to build 1.5 million houses. So it's trying to say that there might be a couple of years delay in us meeting that 600 figure, but we'd have a timetable as to how we were going to get there.
I think that's fair.
Obviously that could be monitored by government. I'm sure it will be, over time. So that's one of our suggestions. The other thing, that we could potentially include is demonstrable performance against the oversupply against the last 3 years. For example, it's something that we could put in. I think it's likely that the response to that will be that's against your old target, but nevertheless we could make that point. But as it's drafted at the minute, we've got in the line about the timetable.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think David's covered most of it really. I was going to say in summary, really, there are, some headlines to look at for us, really. The consultation from the government is obviously looking at its manifesto commitment, as I mentioned earlier, to 1.5 million homes in the life of the Parliament. It does have serious impacts on North East Derbyshire. I hope through the consultation we've made strong representation back to the government, where we're not satisfied with it, and where changes could be made to help districts like North East Derbyshire that's actually been performing, as we had in the last agenda item, quite well, really, against its local plan. So the key things we need to look at, I think, are the proposals of new ways of calculating housing needs, so a formula that replaces population projections with figures based on an increase relative to housing stock, and how that fits with us. As David said, the proposed method does produce significantly higher annual housing targets for North East Derbyshire. And we've got a response that makes it clear, as we've laboured through this meeting, that transition arrangements should apply to district like ours. We've got a local plan that's currently working. It's less than 5 years old and has delivered, well above its targets for the last few years. As you mentioned, Chair, there are questions about how the grey belt will be defined, and concerns raised in relation to the likelihood that more green belt land will be susceptible. There needs to be some more definition on that. Although as a local authority, we are in a position of determining which any of our land might be classed as grey belt. That's not going to be imposed upon us. We've got a chance to look at that. It will be a key thing for the steering group to look at when looking at the local plan. But some more guidance on what would be grey belt would be useful. And it's proposing return of strategic planning to regional level. While that might be okay, the impact will be far more effective again if transitional arrangements to the new method were introduced. And if not, there's a real risk to us that the local plan could be overtaken and not effective anymore, leading to speculative development, which has put us in a really difficult position. We have made a response about that. It's question 7, I think, Chair, the response to that. But I'd just like that to be strengthened a bit. Question 7, do you agree that all local planning authorities should be required to continue to demonstrate 5 years of deliverable sites? Yes, we should. But the response says, however, traditional arrangements should give LPA sufficient opportunity to adjust the new elevated targets to avoid this with up-to-date, where we've got up-to-date local plans.
Yeah.
I think we should write in there, we should have a sentence in there that specifically mentions development. So we highlight what we mean. We're saying to government it's a concern, a worry for North East Derbyshire. There is a way to prevent that. Currently, we're not susceptible to speculative development because we've got a plan that's effective. If the new arrangements come in next week and scupper our local plan, there's developers out there, I think, just ready to rubber stamp the contract and send it in and start it. It's a real worry for us. So I'd like the answer to that, to have probably a sentence in or something that specifically highlights with the agreement of Cabinet our concerns about speculative development.
That's all right, David. You've got that where to fit it.
Yeah, that's no problem, Chair. Yeah.
Any more comments or questions on this before we? It is massive. It is a big change for not only us, but every district in Borough in the country. But if there's a commitment, like we said at the council meeting, it was a clear manifesto pledge at the election that they carry out.
I can just make one comment, Chair, in relation to the third recommendation, in relation to the reduction of the timetable that we were just talking about. So the point to highlight here is that again, it's included within the consultation, but just before members make a decision, this is quite an important point. The previous government were talking about introducing a new streamlined 30-month process for local plans from basically inception to adoption. And when they were when the Levelling Up and Regeneration Act was brought in, previous governments were talking about introducing those changes, that new system, around now. The consultation talks about delaying that 12 months, so that new system, same 30-month system, effectively be brought in from, well, they're saying summer or autumn 25 next year. And in line with that extension, what they've also done is extend the period whereby a council can apply to, can submit to the planning inspectorate a local plan for consideration under the current system. So before this 30-month takes hold, you'd be able to submit a plan for consideration under the current system. That deadline has been extended to the end of 2026. So the reason for the third recommendation is that because that's part of the consultation, and it is a consultation, so there's some uncertainty about it. But from an officer perspective, we need to be moving a bit more towards the front foot, trying to meet that deadline.
Yeah.
So whereby, because of that extension, it's now something that we feel as officers, we need to scope out whether it's possible to get a local plan to the planning inspectorate by the end of 2026.
Right,
Because having started the evidence-based review work, that 2-year period is potentially possible. Can't commit to it, isn't it? And that's the point of the exercise that they've asked at recommendation 3.
now that makes
But that's just for cabinet information, because that work, that potential timetable will be come into a future conversation.
Thank you, David. Yeah, that's all clear. You want to move the?
Move it, Chair, yes, you're right, Chair, you know, the current government did campaign on providing those houses over that. It will have some impact on us, you know, you can't get away from that, and that's not really an issue. What we need to do is make sure that we represent North East Derbyshire's concerns and our needs, within that planning programme. So with that, Chair, I'll move the recommendations 1, 2 and 3.
Thank you, I'll second them. Are we all in favour of those recommendations then?
Yeah.
Thank you. That's good. I'll move on. Item 10, urgent items. To consider any other matter which the leading of the opinion should be considered as a matter of urgency. Conform to the revisions of statutory instruments 2012, number 2089, regulation 11. That's it. There's no urgent item. I don't tell us. So any urgent item? No urgent item. No urgent item. Thank you for your attendance and good luck. Thank you. Did you enjoy that, Amy?